Well, it's obviously been a very challenging and tragic time for so many of our fellow countrymen here in the United States, around the world, and a worrisome time, obviously, both for our own personal health and safety and that of our families, and for our field and how it will survive. But I'm really happy to say that, even in this unusual and unprecedented time, I've just been flourishing with a lot of unique projects that wouldn't have existed but for this time. And, I've just been going full tilt and have been really quite densely engaged, though albeit virtually.
You've been going full tilt for a long time, going through your
That's
biography, and
true.
it's so
Yeah.
exciting to see the incredible variety of projects you're involved with. And I look forward to delving into that. So, how have you adapted to online concerts and platforms? Has that been something new for you? Has it been something you've been doing for years?
Well, the teaching that I've done over the years, just as a guest artist, got me familiar with the Zoom platform and the Skype platform from years ago. So that was really not a new thing for me. But performance-wise, I don't think that streaming performances or recorded performances was anything that I really, did before this time. But I got used to it very quickly, and I just jumped in and wanted to be productive and creative and make use of this time, away from the hustle and bustle. But it turned out the hustle and bustle, was replaced in a new way. Just engaging with creative projects and performing all over the world, and in a blink of an eye, and this, in only in the way that only this virtual platform will allow us. So it's been a really interesting time, and I've adapted, I think, quite well. And it's just been very, very productive time for me.
I've really enjoyed on these interviews seeing how creative artists are being creative in this time period and engaging their audiences in ways that they may not have done before. And you're at the forefront of that, definitely. Why don't we start at the beginning of your performing arts career? Did you always know you wanted to be a musician?
Yes. I started playing the violin on my own volition at age 9. I wish that I had connected with it sooner. I wish I had discovered my connection with music sooner, but I think all things happen at the time they're supposed to. And I think I always sifted music out of the environment that I found myself in. And so when a few things sort of came together in catalyst moments, both from going to my Lutheran church on the weekends and hearing the Baroque music and music of Bach, and on Saturdays hearing Warner Brothers cartoons and the incredible marriage of music and movement, which I've always been enthralled with, and those great scores, original scores of Warner Brothers. And then when my elementary school took us to hear the local orchestra, the Greenville Symphony, I was pretty transfixed. And I remember hanging over the balcony and listening to that. And so when they followed that with a string quartet coming to my elementary school, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to play the violin. And I pretty much knew immediately I wanted to do it professionally, even not having fully grasped a model of what that meant in South Carolina. I wasn't totally sure, but I just knew that this was something that I needed in my life.
And you've returned the Greenville Symphony as a soloist multiple times. Is that correct?
I think once with the Greenville Symphony and once with my former youth orchestra.
Oh, what's it like coming back as someone who's going to have that effect on the next generation in your former hometown?
Well, it was the most recent iteration. Actually, was a couple of years ago. I was awarded or I was inducted into the Hall of Fame in my hometown. So that was really special because it's the first time that I had been back to my schools since graduating. Since my family moved away, my mom moved away. So yeah, it was very special, and it was great to connect with my beloved Fine Arts Center, which is the art school, the arts magnet school that I think is so critical in shaping who I am today.
Wow. So growing up, where did you go to your undergraduate?
The Eastman School of Music, and with Charlie Castleman, and my master's at the Manhattan School of Music with Glenn Dictorow.
And you've recently, I know you were awarded an honorary doctor from Manhattan School, and then you recently, 2 years ago, became a professor there. How has it been like coming full circle and putting your stamp on the next generation of professional musicians?
It's been really wonderful to just both to discover students, whether I teach them or not, just to hear, through the audition process, to hear students from all over the world and hear the work that's being done. It's inspiring, and it's humbling to think that I'm going to have a hand in shaping that. And I think about how meaningful the relationships were and are, that I had and have with my teachers. And I think it's very humbling to think, that if I do things right, that I hopefully will have that kind of impact on the next generation of players.
That's so exciting to have that mentor and that teacher who's out there in the professional world performing so frequently. What are some of the first experiences you had as a concerto soloist, and how has that shaped what you do today?
I think my first experiences as a concerto soloist were winning the concerto competition, for my youth orchestra, and possibly the junior all-state orchestra. No, it was I think it was my youth orchestra and the senior all-state orchestra. So, when I was a teenager, considering, I started at 9. So, yeah, I just it was something that I identified with right away. I really love, finding the music between the notes, between the lines, beyond the dots on the page. And I think that's something that I connected with right away. And there's
So
just something in me that wanted to speak.
that's so important. I just finished 5 hours of judging via Zoom today. That's a first for me. I just actually judged a competition on Zoom, and I'm watching these really talented 16 and 17-year-old musicians rising to the challenge, and it's so rewarding to watch this next generation step up and to give them the opportunity to advance their careers. And I've always enjoyed that process, and it's exciting that you get to be a major player in that.
Yeah, I mean, and I've also judged a lot of competitions this year on Zoom and also in prior years, and I find it inspiring just to see, just the work that people are doing around the world or around the country. Um, Nothing can be assumed from any location or from really tiny small markets. There are people that are inspired, by things beyond their immediate experience, and with really fantastic teaching and a lot of hard work. And it's amazing to see where young people are going.
I think that the COVID period, for one thing, at least has taken geography out of a lot of the education process. People can study with people all over the world these days. And I think that's a positive. Maybe that's something we take with us into the next chapter.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, there was a lot of discussion, I think, early on with university conservatory education as to whether or not there was enough value in an online experience. But I think that you're ultimately attending and paying for the expertise, not the platform, not the accoutrement that we all enjoy, the nice campus, and then, aside from the facilities that we simply can't use, the concert halls and some of the instruments and things like that. I think that, having access to the expertise is the most important thing. If somebody had told me, I used to look up to, or still do, look up to Pinchas Zuckerman and artists like that when I was growing up. If somebody had told me that through a platform I could have lessons with him, I would have been thrilled. So I think it really has eliminated a lot of geographical barriers, and barriers of access, and that's a really good thing. I hope we take much of what we've discovered this year along with us when we're finally able to gather again.
Well, we've all learned so much, and I think as educators, I'm also an educator. Like how to provide for our communities and to meet the challenges, even though we're dealing with all these challenges together, to find those solutions. It's been a Herculean task, but in the end, I think we're going to be better having had to make those decisions and think about that.
We'll definitely be a unique generation of folks having lived through this once in a century pandemic.
Now, so what I love about a great violinist or a great string player is that great violinists, they can play in quartets, solo, orchestral situations, concerti. They're able to adapt to any circumstance. How come that's so easy and seamless for you?
Well, I think that, as I mentioned, I have a sensibility and a temperament about speaking music in my own voice, but I think I believed that there was only one path to having a career, and I thought that was through an orchestra. Now, I absolutely love the orchestral repertoire. Absolutely love it. I grew up on it. I still thrive on it. Um, but I think I did a degree in orchestral performance for my master's and fully intending to go in that direction, and I did for a while. But I think that to know, I eventually went back to my soloist inclinations, and I feel like to really know a composer, you can't just play one genre. You can't just know one genre. There's some aspects of the musical canon that I'm never going to be able to render in a tactile way. I'm not a pianist. I mean, I can play a little bit of piano, but I'm not a pianist. I think it's important to know, the great piano works of a composer in order to know their total life's work, or the opera, or I'm not a singer. But I do have the great privilege as a violinist of being able to have played so many different genres, as you mentioned, the solo, the chamber music, the orchestral. And I think that's a really important part of one's artistic perspective, not to mention development as a student, but perspective I think is key. So I used to feel kind of self-conscious that I came to be a soloist through that path, whereas many people are, kind of designated and trained and sort of pointed towards solo careers right away. I knew that was something that I was doing all along, but I went through all of these various paths that I think prepared me, better than I would have been.
What concerto have you played the most at this point in your career? And do you have any any composers that stand out to you as your top three or four?
Oh gosh, well I love the one that I'm playing,
I'm the
but I
same way with operas.
yeah, but I have played, I'd say that the three that I've played the most are probably Barber, ironically, well no, not all American. Barber, Beethoven, and at this point Florence Price. So the
Interesting.
Beethoven concerto. And I've played a fair number, and yeah, I think those are the most repeats. Or maybe actually, I worked with Mark O'Connor for about 5 years, and we performed his double violin concerto. Probably it would make the same list of repetitions. We also played his string quartet. We had some 45 or 50 dates together over 5 years, so there were some definitely a lot of repetition, particularly of the quartets.
How
But
does
yeah.
repeated engagement with a piece of music? How does that deepen your knowledge of that piece of music, and how has your interpretation of one of those pieces changed over the time as you've played them at different points in your life?
Well, I think it's not something, sometimes there's a conscious decision about a change. Oftentimes there can be a conscious decision, but most often it's an evolution that is, may not even be perceptible to me unless I might hear a recording of myself. And I was like, oh, wow, I played it faster, or I played it slower, or I did that slide there. Oh, I did that then, but my mom will hear me play and she's like, you changed it. I'm like, really? Did I? Because she's very aware, of all of my interpretive voices, and she'll hear, she'll listen to a recording of me playing something, ad nauseum, like over and over again, and so she'll be very aware, and I'm less aware of, unless it's a conscious choice to go in a different direction. It's more of an evolution, and things just sort of become more clarified, or they deepen, or yeah, I would say it's more like that.
I find like whenever I can come back to a piece I've done a lot, I look at it. It's like Traviata I've done like 30 times. I come back to it a couple of years later, and it's like looking at a fine painting. The slight change in the perspective, or the size of the concert venue, or the soloists who are different, or the orchestra is different. Everything changes
Yes.
slightly. Just a little bit. That's what makes it interesting. Is that slight variations.
Definitely the orchestra makes a big difference in how a piece feels, because different sections are stronger or more, have more color or more presence or whatever, and that grabs your attention and causes you to play it differently. So definitely the orchestra will have a big impact on that, or the
I,
pianist.
yeah, I loved your barber. The barber I've heard of you perform is beautiful, just beautiful.
Oh,
The
thanks so much.
So, what concerto do you have? Do you have? Is there any you haven't done yet that you have in your list of things you'd love to perform?
I have actually, when I was in school, I played for auditions, I ended up playing a lot the Bartok second concerto, but I never really played the whole thing, and I never played it with orchestra. And that's a piece that I love so much, and I would really love to play it at some point. But
Fiery
for
or
this,
rhythmic.
oh,
Awesome.
it's just awesome in every way. But this year, I have my hands quite full because I am engaged to play the new violin concerto by Wynton Marsalis next
Wow.
year, and so that is it's a huge piece, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's a really unique piece, and so yeah, that's on the docket.
Do you have the music on your stand already, or is it still being
I do.
composed? Oh, you
Oh no,
do.
it wasn't composed for me, but it is new. I don't really know how much it's been played. It was written for Nicola Benedetti, and it's been premiered already. But I think it's relatively new still, and really excited about playing it.
What's it like approaching a work that's not as often performed? I know when you do the Beethoven, it's been done, for a long performance practice history. But when something new, you really get to kind of put your own stamp on it in a way.
I put my own stamp on everything, I have to say. I mean, Beethoven, I have a very, 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 um, I have a very committed perspective on how I think the piece should be, and it's not something that I often hear among other performances. So I am not shy about carving a piece. Obviously we're curators of a tradition, so we have to be extremely well informed historically about what is allowable performance practice. But aside from that, I think that a piece really has to come to life, not just with the little dots on the page, but well beyond that. And that is definitely a piece that speaks. It's such a deeply spiritual piece to me, the Beethoven Violin Concerto, and I definitely feel like um, I have a unique stamp on it. But it's also fun to be able to bring that to a piece that's brand new. I mean, it's figuring out what the piece is, what it's about, what its voice is, what my voice is relative to those things. There are pieces that draw things out of you that you didn't know were there. I got to play the U.S. premiere of the Siegfried Matus concerto in 2016, the German composer, and that had been premiered one time in Germany. But aside from that, I still was able to find my own unique voice. If I don't find a unique calling for a piece, I won't play it. I mean, and it's hard for me not to find a calling because I'm very generous that way. But there have been some things where I just have to say I don't really it doesn't speak to me, and these are months, days, and years of our lives, spent dedicated to these works. So it really has to have a place of resonance. But yeah, I find it's really interesting, and delving into that piece, I feel like there are things that certainly there are themes um, and approaches that don't exist anywhere else in the repertoire. One bit of crossover that reminds me is playing some of the fiddle, the fiddle inspired classical contemporary music of Mark O'Connor. So there is definitely fiddle inspired classical music, of Wynton Marsalis in that, and that's the kind of thing that growing up in South Carolina, I didn't even realize was getting in there, but it's in there. And people, when I was playing his music, O'Connor, people thought I was a fiddler, like they thought I was a bluegrass fiddler or whatever, a roots fiddler. But I'm like, no, it just really something. It's given life to a voice in myself that I didn't really realize was there, given an animus to that. So I fully expect to have that opportunity with the Marsalis as well. There are things that I don't have an opportunity to play in any other work.
That's so exciting to get to experience new works and to put yourself in these pieces of music. The Florence Price, what was that like? I mean, I've heard of a real explosion of her art songs in the last year, especially. A lot of my colleagues have been performing them, and they're wonderful. What was that piece like? I'm going to go check that out. The Florence Price Concerto.
The second violin concerto is the one that I play. It's a piece in one movement. It's really, really gorgeous writing. Very, I first was concertmaster of a festival orchestra where I played, where I first heard her name. I think 4 years ago. I'd not even heard her name before. Or with the pandemic, you have to always add one. When I want to say 4 years ago, was it 5? Yeah.
It's a phantom year.
Anyway, and the writing was so extraordinary and technically challenging that I thought, my goodness, she understands the violin really well. She's, writes in a really virtuosic way. I wonder if she has violin concerti. And as it turned out, I don't think they had been discovered at that point. They
Oh,
were discovered in her abandoned second home, a lake house near Chicago. And the new owners, I think if I remember correctly, it hasn't been occupied since she died in 1953. And so it was in rather dilapidated condition. But when they went in to renovate, they apparently found the sheet music, including two concertos. And fortunately, they were fully intact.
what a
So
miracle that they survived.
it's a miracle. It really is. And so, yeah, I'm delighted to play the piece. It's very difficult, but it's really gorgeous. And it's got you again. It has a unique voice in the repertoire. There's nothing else quite like it. We know Korngold also drew, and several people drew from Hollywood, but I think Florence Price has a unique, very Strauss meets romanticism meets whole tone meets 1930s Hollywood. I mean, if you can imagine all of that kind of living in the same space. Unique colors. She uses the celeste. She writes beautifully for brass. I think one of the best moments and one of the nicest moments in the piece is this. It's kind of a lot of notes in the violin part. It's a descant of sextuplets, but it's over what starts as a brass chorale. And it's very American nostalgic writing. We sort of assigned those adjectives just to one composer, like American. Or like, oh well, Copeland. Well, no, it's not Copeland. It's its own unique voice, and yet it's so quintessentially American.
I love when we get these unique blends and we hear new voices. There's so much that we can add to our current repertoire of American composers, and there's some really great voices that just haven't gotten the play. And it makes sense that those concertos have sat if they've been living in someone's uninhabited building. I'm glad that they've
Right.
been discovered.
They've been discovered, and now, I think really late in the historical trajectory. But Florence Price has become the first African American woman composer to be published by a major publisher. She's published by G. Schirmer. So those pieces are now in good hands and well curated.
Have you had any plans to record those pieces, or any of those
Not
type of?
yet, but it's definitely in my considerations.
Excellent. We have our first question from the audience. This is Amanda from the Bronx who asks, "How does a composer find their voice?" Good
Hmm.
question.
That is such a good question because I would have disqualified myself to answer it not too long ago. But I have sort of recently become a composer myself, or I've recently discovered that aspect of my. And my mom told me my whole life when people would say, "Do you compose?" I'd say, "Oh, no, 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 no." And she would say, "Well, why did you say that?" I'm like, "Because I'm not." But I think, again, all things in due time. I think it's something that has sort of come out of me. And that's exactly the first, well, the first near, well, let's see. I've had little forays into composition. The first one was actually, I did an arrangement of the song from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Pure Imagination. And I did it in a jazz inflected idiom. And so I then wrote for myself a jazz solo. I don't improvise. I wrote it. And, I was quite pleased with how that came out. And then I think another step forward was I wrote a solo violin arrangement of the song from my Broadway experience, If I Were a Rich Man. And that is so different from the actual song that it is definitely more in the column of composition than anything else. But then finally, in a project that we can discuss a little bit later, perhaps through my Music Kitchen organization, we commissioned 15 composers to set the incidental comments of the homeless shelter clients that we've served over 15 years to song. And it's a song cycle called Forgotten Voices. And somebody suggested that I should write one of these songs. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous because I want real composers. But I was so passionate, and I am so passionate about that project. that early on in the process, a song came out of me, and who knew?
Wow.
And I was wondering as I was sitting down to do this, what would be my voice? To get back to the listener's question, what is my voice as a composer? I really didn't know, but I got a germ of an idea in my head, and I was like, well, this is probably not going to work out, but I'm just going to write that down. And then the next packet of ideas came to me, and I wrote that down. And the next packet of ideas came to me, and I was really kind of surprised that for somebody like myself, who is um, such a 19th century traditionalist in many ways, even as I'm an innovator, I'm happily an innovator, and I push the envelope, and I push the boundaries. But at heart, I'm kind of a 19th century traditionalist, and Brahms is one of my favorite composers. But I found that this song that I put to paper was, it had a lot of sevenths. It was asymmetrical. It definitely had melody. It has melody to it, but it was really an issue of discovering something rather than making it so. So I think that finding is the key word. How does a composer find their voice? They find it. They don't necessarily make it. That would be my answer.
And how do you guide your students and people you work with, performers, to find their unique voices?
In performing,
Sure.
well, definitely. I think that I guide people first. I think on the younger end of things, for undergraduates, I lend them aspects of my voice. But I'm not the kind of teacher that wants everyone to play the way I play, but I give them a sense of, well, this is how this goes beyond the page here. And then sometimes oftentimes they have beautiful elements that are within them, and I encourage those to develop. I'm like, that's how that comes through, that phrase there, and I constantly encourage my students to go beyond the page and to find, I think everybody sort of has intrinsically a sensibility and a perspective, and hopefully it's a musically robust one. And I like to grow that. I like to see little germs of that grow into something larger, until, like all of us, we shed the training wheels of our teachers, and we have to find that for ourselves. We're constantly referring back to that time, and that advice. But I think it's, you borrow and try on, like shoes, some aspects of your teacher's ideas, but then they never are fully the teachers. They're always translated through the lens of your own being, as it should be. And then eventually you just take those tools and you learn to bring your voice through those tools.
Thank you for sharing those very powerful insights, really great metaphors. Really appreciate that. So you mentioned the Fiddler on the Roof, a show which you have some experience with. Tell us how that came to be for you, the next chapter of your performing.
Well, I was, let's see, I was performing as concertmaster. I sometimes play as a fill-in concertmaster at the New York Pops, and so I was concertmaster at Carnegie Hall for some concert, where in the audience was someone who lives in both worlds. He was a manager to great artists that I admire tremendously, like Itzhak Perlman and Joshua Bell, and also a major Broadway coordinator. And he approached me, he introduced himself, and then later contacted me a short time later, saying this Fiddler on the Roof is starting, and would you be interested? And I thought, it's it's something that I've sort of held at bay, because I'm such, I'm so, you know such a traditionalist in a lot of ways, and so mired in the classical world in ways that I love. But I had already pushed the boundaries of that. Just before that was my imagination project, where I created two music videos of the pure imagination that I mentioned, and also the Izai Solo Sonata No. 6, one of the hardest pieces in our repertoire. And he had seen that, as well as my performance on at Carnegie Hall. So he invited me to do this, and I thought, you know what, it'll be the experience of a lifetime. I didn't even know the half of it when I said those words to myself. It was one of the most extraordinary personal and professional experiences of my life so far. And I thoroughly marinated in it and enjoyed every moment of it. I never would have thought myself capable of playing the same music every night for 400 some performances, but they wrote into the score a solo role for me that
Wow.
doesn't that has never existed in the Broadway score before. So I had this clay to mold. And then, if that were not enough, I was so incredibly inspired by this incredible company of actors and dancers that we had, led by our own brilliant Danny Burstein, and who played Tevye, the main character, and Jessica Hecht. And the power of the story, combined with the power of their artistry and the opportunity to shape this music in direct response, sometimes me alone in the theater, was just this powerful experience. And I'm a better artist because of it. Some of the best work that I've done in my career was that year when I got to be a soloist every night of the week, and
Wow.
twice on Saturdays. um, and Wednesdays. So I think it was a unique experience. I wouldn't expect all of them to be that way, but I'm the kind of person that once I decide to do something, I jump in with both feet, both hands, and all the hairs on my head, and I just really go for it and make the most of it.
That
And I
boldness is
definitely
so exciting. And what was it like being on the stage like that in a new way of having to act, being staged, working with a director like Bartlett Sher? What was that like?
Well, that is the thing. This is a most unique paradox. This was not Hamilton. So I did not fit the casting model they were doing. I was never seen on stage. I had a counterpart that was a dancer. And in fact, his role went beyond what most fiddler roles do in that they flew him 70 feet above the stage. So this is not someone who ever could have been a violinist anyway. So I trained him to look like he was playing, and the more Bartlett Shear, the director, liked my solos, the more he choreographed Jesse Kowarski, my co-fiddler, to be on stage. He wasn't on stage for all of my solos, but for many of them, because he liked what I was saying, he made a role for him on stage, similarly to what might not have existed. So it was really quite extraordinary that even though I wasn't seen, what I did musically got me seen in a higher profile way than any concert that I've done actually on stage. So there was quite a lot of press that resulted from that. But working with Bart was amazing. I was so enthralled by the whole Broadway process. It's so There's so many hours. I wouldn't really call them grueling, but they're certainly the actors' schedules, I would say, is a little bit more on the grueling side. But even beyond all of the rehearsal hours that we had in the theater, I stayed behind just to watch the whole process come together. And I watched tech rehearsals. Tech rehearsals are fascinating. They're like watching paint dry, but they're fascinating. They move very slowly. It's where they just make all the decisions. And so I was sitting right behind Bart, and we were chatting occasionally when he'd say, "Oh, isn't that beautiful?" I'm like, "Yes, that is a gorgeous scene. The way you put that together with the men and whatever." And I watched him make those decisions. For the times that I was there, I didn't watch the whole show get put together, but I watched him say, "Okay, take the book and put it in your hand. Put it in her hand. No, let's try it. Leave the book on the table. No, slide the book across the stage. No." I mean, I watched the sausage being made, and it was fascinating, and it went into even more inspiration for what I decided to do. I feel like there's particularly since, well, I had an elevated perch in the pit, so I was able to see the vast majority, and we were able to play off of one another.
Oh, that's
But
great.
there's still the stuff that was way at the back of the stage that I would not have ever really seen had I not gone to some of those tech rehearsals. And what I saw and what inspired me is what um, what caused me to make the choices artistically about my solos. But then, of course, there was just this in real time to be able to watch Danny Burstein or to hear him, both watch and hear him change the nuance with which he delivered the lines, which I then had the incredible opportunity to respond musically to directly. It was incredible, like as I mentioned, and I was embraced by the company in a way that I could not have imagined. As their musical fiddler, and it was just, as I mentioned, just one of the most extraordinary personal and professional experiences of my life.
What did you learn about yourself stepping out of the classical box into this whole new genre of music? What did that teach you?
Well, I think it was not a first. I think at that point I was already quite used to pushing boundaries, and I think as any string player in New York City that cut their teeth in school at gigging, I think you can't really. It would be very difficult not to have some chops outside of the classical realm. But so I had definitely done those things as a master's student and just out of school and whatnot. But I mean, popular music styles and that sort of thing. But I think there's still I learned that I learned from everyone that, according to what they told me, that I have this Jewish voice deep in my soul that comes through, and I enjoyed exploring that. But there's also these um, some of it draws from the Semitic tradition, and some of it is very much Broadway, in a more kind of quintessential sense. And I think there are rhythmic elements to that. There's timing and shaping and way that just cannot be classical. You have to know when to draw, how to draw seamlessly from all of those. And I think I learned much more acutely how to put that into action, day after day after day after day after day after day after day. And yeah, it was great.
What an amazing experience. How many performances did you wind up playing?
I think it was less than 500, but over 400.
So that's
And I
over
loved
almost a
every,
year, right? Almost a year.
it was 13 months. I loved every second of it.
How exciting.
And to have some friends from that experience for life.
Now, how did you decide to do your project, your recording project on the
Which
fiddler?
one? Well, from everything that I've just told you, it was so tremendously inspiring. The first thing that I think we were in the midst of recording our cast album when Out of Me came. I was inspired by so many things that Danny did on stage. Among those was this "If I Were a Rich Man" song, which in the context of this show, it's a very virtuosic show for the lead actor because there's so much text. But that one song is the most analogous to the idea of a solo violin piece. That's the kind of thing that we live, this virtuosic statement that can also be fun and whimsical, but it is sort of the showstopper song that everybody knows. It's practically kabuki theater. Everybody knows it. They wait for it. And something about the energy of that and the energy that Danny delivered it without taking anything away from him. In fact, I dedicated the piece to him. I wanted to create the solo violin version of that song, and so during our cast album, that's the first thing that just sort of came out of me. And I started playing it for people. I played it for one of our arrangers, and he said, "You've created something really wonderful." I was like, "Oh wow!" And I played it for our music director Ted Sperling, and he was like, "This is great." And I played it for Sheldon Harnick, the lyricist of Fiddler, and he loved it and helped me, make contacts to try to get it published. It's a little complicated with all the, with
The
uh,
rights and
uh,
royalties, sure.
well, they gave me the rights to do it, but it's still complicated because it only lives in a musical theater world, and it doesn't usually live in a So anyway, but I appreciate so much Sheldon's endorsement and help with that aspect of it. And then I realized very quickly that that's not all. I think I need to go further with this whole idea to crystallize the experience that I've lived with for 13 months. And so I worked with the two people I mentioned, both of the arrangers on our production, Oran Eldor and Ted Sperling, also the music director, to flesh out. I had very specific ideas about how I wanted to encapsulate what we did, but also to go beyond what we did to something more imaginative and to have a reason to exist as a violin piece. I didn't want to have music where you just play the melodies that everybody knows, but on a violin. It had to be more than that, and I already conceived of something more than that, and they were the perfect partners to work with to bring that to life. And that is my album, my most recent one, the fourth album, The Fiddler Expanding Tradition.
It's amazing. Who better to bring this Broadway style back to the classical tradition, kind of in a hybrid form in a new and exciting way than yourself?
Oh, thank you. Well, it is the first ever fiddler solo album by the fiddler of the um, of the production. So yeah,
Are there plans for more of this of these type of collaborations? Maybe a symphonic version as well.
I have already done those. So we have orchestrated some of them. I worked with Ted Sperling on a concert. The ironic thing is that I'm known for I'm known for living in comfortably in all of these worlds, and so I love that I get engaged to play um, everything alongside. So I've played the orchestrated version of my Fiddler Rhapsody alongside Beethoven Violin Concerto in the
That's
same concert.
fantastic.
Also alongside the Matus, the Siegfried Matus premiere that I mentioned. I think actually I played the John Williams piece for that, but I played a fiddler piece during my role on Broadway, and I will also play it coming up with the Florence Price. So yeah, we have orchestrations and are prepared to do the full program orchestrate. But I wanted, for the sake of my CD, I wanted to encapsulate the unique orchestration and color of the more idiomatic small ensemble. So it has guitar, bass, and accordion as
Perfect.
a company.
Perfect accompaniment. I think I heard some of those arrangements on Alison Charney's Performances series.
Yes, probably so. Mhm.
It was really
Miracle of
beautiful.
Miracles, I think, was on that one. Yes.
That's right. I remember that. So, you also, addition and congratulations. I know the New York Times hailed you as New Yorker of the Year one year. That's what's it like getting all that acclaim and doing Broadway and being an acclaimed soloist, doing it and finding your own voice in New York City. How special is New
Well,
York to you?
I love New York. I absolutely loved New York. I knew as a young student in South Carolina that I wanted to go to New York, and so it is it really is a dream come true. I feel like I was born a New Yorker. I just was born in the South, but it really to be featured in the New York Times for both from my role on Broadway, from my organization Music Kitchen, and then as New Yorker of the Year is an honor and a joy. And I have to say, I thought that was a spam. I thought that was a spam email when I got that. Like, what is this New Yorker? What? What is that? But it turned out to be true. So I couldn't have been more thrilled.
Let's talk about your commitment to social justice and your Music Kitchen initiative. Tell us how that started, and has that always been something that's close to your heart?
I think it's been something that's always been close to my heart in one way or another. I am remembering little pieces of my life that I have forgotten about. In high school, first of all, my grandmother is such a kind soul, and she has, although I didn't really think of it as a direct link, she spent so much of her life as helping others. She just until a few years ago, she's 96 now, but just until a few years ago, she used to cook breakfasts for the homeless on the weekends and with a church group of hers and take them to the park and every other week or something like that. And when I was in high school, I remember trying to drum up this program to take restaurant food that wasn't used the same day to deliver to homeless shelters, but they wouldn't allow it. My high school conception of it, couldn't get past food regulations and that kind of thing. So I kind of abandoned that idea. But Music Kitchen, so I think it's been in my consciousness to help people. I enjoy helping people. I help people on the street of New York all the time. There are probably hundreds of tourists who, if they saw my picture on the screen back in their home country, would say, "Oh, she helped us find our restaurant." So I think it's something that I kind of identify with doing. But for Music Kitchen specifically, I had been a volunteer cook at my church shelter, and I find that very stressful. I cook just fine, but but being the thing that comes between people in need and a hot cooked meal, that's not the kind of pressure that I really enjoy. But I found myself needing an audience to play through some concert music that was coming up, a concerto, and I ended up playing it for them, and they loved it. And immediately, my sense of wanting to help people came together with my other sense of chamber music parties. And some of the most extraordinary chamber music parties that I had been to, where there's this greater than the sum of the parts thing that happens when people come together quasi spontaneously to play. There's almost more magic and fire than if those people had been hired to rehearse a concert and then play a concert. There's something very special about when people come together. And so I knew that that was an energy I wanted to bring to playing for people who would otherwise not have access to it. And I knew it had to be chamber music. Even though I initially played for them solo music, I thought, no, solo music is not the model for this. It's chamber music. And so I created that program in 2005. We're now, as of this month, in our 16th year, presented over 120 concerts, reached an estimated 30,000 shelter clients from New York to Los Angeles, and even many states in between, and also in Paris, France, on one occasion. It's been it's something that I never ever anticipated doing, because I enjoy playing concerts, not necessarily administrating them, but I do find that it's another creative outlet for me to create concerts and to create the joy that I want people to experience through them. It is for me social justice, and also just sharing the incredible power of music. Well, I guess that is the social justice aspect of it. People that wouldn't otherwise have access to it at this point in their lives. Some of them have never had access to it ever. Some of them used to be former major concert hall subscribers and donors, and they've had change of circumstances. But it's this mix of all sorts of people that no prerequisite for homelessness. And so it's been really again one of the most rewarding personal and professional things I've done in my life. And when I came up with this Forgotten Voices song cycle that I mentioned, to feature now the feedback that we've been receiving for 15 years, I'm really ecstatic that when I approached Carnegie Hall about this, they came on as a partner. So
Wow.
a partner in the commission. They contributed towards the commission, and they will co-present the world premiere of Forgotten Voices song cycle. That was supposed to have happened, before last May, but of course we know what happened. So we're in the process of rescheduling now.
Being rescheduled, that's important, but it'll definitely happen. So, do you have any personal stories to tell us? I'm sure you have thousands of personal stories to tell us,
Oh,
but give us one that sticks in your mind about maybe how people were transfixed and transformed by hearing great music in those circumstances.
yeah, well, there's so many stories. When I think about the comments that people have given me, there's one gentleman I remember because I recorded his comment, and he said, and some of the best comments to me are broken English sometimes, um, or in various states of grammar. It's the sentiment is comes so powerfully through, and he says something like, I have a cousin who's a doctor, and he used to travel all around the world to hear music like this. I never knew why, but now I know why. He said this music makes me feel so special, and he said the music I be listening to doesn't make me feel this way. This music makes me feel so. And then there was another woman who just said that she will remember this day for the rest of her life. She said, I am forever changed because you musicians came here today. There's some incredible stories. And then there's another lady who, um, eh, covered in tattoos. And when I mentioned that I was, having a colleague of mine from the Berlin Philharmonic come soon to the subsequent concert at the shelter, she says, "Oh, did you know Von Karajan?" Oh, of course, you didn't know Von Karajan. You're too young. But she said, and then she just mentioned 30 years of conducting history of the Berlin Philharmonic with total facility and knowledge. And I was
Wow.
just like, wow. And she was one of those people who was a former subscriber, and her mother was a donor, for Carnegie Hall. And I think of her. I don't know where she is today. I don't. It was a few occurrences in time that our paths crossed, and she, and then there's another lady who, we usually will play in a place where people can hear the performance and they can choose to come closer if they don't already, haven't already done so. And there was a woman that we tried to get to come closer the first time we met her. She was in a business suit, and I think she seemed really dejected and depressed. So Russian lady, I think. And she said, no, no, I don't want to, but after the concert, she came over and gave me a hug, and she says, "You made my day." And then, in fact, that's one of the comments that became a song. Just that
Wow.
short phrase. Yeah, there's so many more, voluminous comments that I can't all, recall all at the moment, but there's so many of them going through my head. People talking about this is such a blessing, and or people that are really just moved by music that is hundreds of years old, having never heard a note of it ever before, and they get the pathos of it, and they are, like some of the quartets of Mozart, or there's a woman who just broke down crying and, with the first page of Brahms' A minor quartet. Oh, or I will never forget, the end of the Brahms G major sextet, where there were some men at the soup kitchen that were watching all of the voices like, a sports game. And when we got to the final cadence, they jumped up and cheered. You would have thought it was the winning touchdown at the Super Bowl. I mean,
I
it
love it.
was it was incredible. I've almost never experienced anything quite like that. So there's so many unique reactions. It's really, it's been an incredible journey. This
To
program.
hear an artist like a distinguished artist like yourself giving back to the community, what an incredible story! And thank you so much for doing that. And really, kudos to continuing to keep that alive. I think it's so important that that everyone in society has access to great music.
Well, thank you. And I must say that I pioneered the program. I, run the program. I founded the program, but I could not have done this alone. And I have an incredible cadre of artists, over 200 artists that have been part of Music Kitchen in 15 years. Not the least of which are artists, who have been so, so, so generous, like Emmanuel Axe and Glenn Dicterow and Albrecht Meyer, who I mentioned from the Berlin Philharmonic, and many, many wonderful emerging artists. Excuse me, Alexis Gerlach and Terrence Wilson, and so many wonderful people. The singers that I'm working with now for the Forgotten Voices project, Adrian Danrich, Alison Charney, Jesse Blumberg, Mark Reisinger, just so many wonderful people that have helped me bring this idea to life. And, it would not have been possible without the great artistry to bring the idea to life. So I'm eternally grateful, for my friends and colleagues who have, stepped on this journey with me.
What an incredible journey it is. So, what do you see the next chapter? COVID is, we're still in the midst of this, but what do you see as your next chapter?
Well, I mean, I am so excited about the things that I've done during this time. I've premiered 4 pieces, and, again, things that wouldn't have happened but for this time. And so I enjoy the idea of continuing some of those relationships and building on them. I did my second, official composition was this year, a spoken word piece with the newly Tony nominated actor Daniel J. Watts, and we co-wrote a piece together called The Gatherers. It's spoken word and violin, and I look forward to doing more with Daniel. I premiered a piece by Ellen Tafe Zwillick in memory of Elijah McClain. That's a really important work, and I also had the opportunity to write the foreword for that. It's now published. In the time that we have been, during COVID, she wrote it for me. I premiered it, and it is now already published with my foreword to the piece, and that's out in the world. Um, and let's see, I worked with the American Composers Orchestra on their commissioning project. Um, uh, what is it? Community building community. And I worked with composer Guy Mintus, and I have this fabulous new piece by him called Inner Compass that draws from our shared love of flamenco. So I look forward to playing that more in the world. And as I mentioned, I have several concertos coming up. I think, we all keep our fingers
Fingers
crossed during this
crossed.
era that these things will come to pass. But I look forward to this has been an incredibly powerful, creative year. I just look forward to going forward with more creative projects and collaborations. And this new Marsalis concerto that I mentioned is on my docket for this year. And I'm a new featured artist in the WQXR's Artist Propulsion Lab, so I have a lot of interesting projects coming up through that. An interview on Morning Edition, which I think comes out this Tuesday. Yeah, some really exciting things. I did a short film. Actually, it's not a premiere of sorts. It's not a new piece of music, but I had the idea of pairing the Shostakovich Violin Concerto cadenza with dance and film. And so there is a film that we made. It's a 5 minute, well, the length of the cadenza, Shostakovich Echo in Catharsis, with dancer Alexandra Peter and the Frisian Films. So I'm really excited about more people seeing that. That's going to be in some film festivals, I think, coming up. And yeah, it's been a really creative and fertile time, and I look forward to building on that when we can also be in person again.
So where can everyone go to see what's coming up for you, and maybe go see you as you start to perform live again? Where can people go to find out where you're performing, when your videos are coming out? How can people engage with your art?
Yes. Well, fantastic. I would be thrilled. If you go to my website, you can join my mailing list. So I send out newsletters with upcoming and things that you can reference after the fact. My YouTube channel has been growing quite a lot during this time with all the videos that we've made during this, during COVID and well before. My imagination project, my fiddler music videos. So I have 4 music videos, official music videos that are on my YouTube channel, and I have over 1 million views, and I hope that you will join those and become one of them, a subscriber and such. The website, my newsletter and the YouTube channel. And yeah, social media, I'm on Instagram as well.
Well, we'll make sure we follow because you have so much exciting news coming up and so many exciting premieres and performances. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Jason.
Continued success and many blessings as you go about your journey.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. We're so delighted that you can be here. Please remember to like and subscribe the video. And thank you so much. And remember, keep music alive.